All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here, for your time. Today, I would like to talk about cannabis and the derivatives of cannabis in the context of pain and anxiety, and what are the risks of using these type of products, and what their potential is for clinical utilities. So these are the objectives that I have for you. I think you already read it, but basically it is, as I say, I'm just gonna talk first about the utility of cannabis products for pain and anxiety. Also, we would like to discuss about how these products can be used for the clinic, and how we can adapt these potential products in the from the legal market or the illegal market, to make it available for patients in different states. And lastly, I'll talk about the CBD products that are very prominent right now in our community, and what is the evidence for their effectiveness, and if they have any place in the clinic, particularly in North Carolina. So let me start with some background on cannabis. So cannabis has been among humanity for millennia. So it's been there. There are records that the cannabis have been used for textiles and also basketry and stuff like that. But also it has been part of the pharmacopoeia of ancient cultures, such as the Chinese culture or the Egyptian culture. So in fact, the Chinese and the Egyptians used cannabis for the treatment of pain, fatigue, or other inflammatory conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis or even malaria. But certainly it's been used for pain for over 5,000 years. So it's a plant that has been among us for a while. Once upon a time, it was legal in the United States, and it was part of the pharmacopoeia as well. But just to give you a little bit of background, so cannabis is the broad name of this plant that it has two different species. So the one species is hemp, that it's basically a very different plant than marijuana, which is the other species. Hemp is taller, is more fibrous, and it does not have the psychoactive component that makes cannabis a recreational drug. It doesn't have THC. It does have abundant levels of cannabidiol or CBD, but mostly it's been used in the industry of automobiles, body care, clothing, construction, food, plastics, etc. So it's a very versatile product. And on the other hand is marijuana. So marijuana is really high in THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the component of marijuana that it produces the high that people that use it for recreational purpose use it for. So this plant, marijuana, is typically used for recreational purposes as a mood enhancer, and also for medical purposes, particularly for pain treatment and other potential conditions. So the thing is that when we talk about cannabis, we are basically talking about hemp and marijuana. And this could create some problems, particularly in terms of the legalization of cannabis. So when people talk about legalizing cannabis, they are talking about legalizing hemp and marijuana. And they use this dichotomy or this ambiguity to promote particular agendas. So that's what happened literally in 1970 when President Nixon banned cannabis. So he banned cannabis because they wanted to ban marijuana because it was used for recreational purposes. But by banning cannabis, it also banned hemp. So all this industry of automobiles and clothing, textiles, basketry, food, plastic, etc., was literally prohibited because people cannot use hemp because it's part of the cannabis family. However, in 2018, the Farm Bill made hemp and its derivatives legal. However, you may think that because CBD or cannabidiol, it's a derivative of hemp, it could be legal. So it is a little tricky because hemp is qualified as a plant that it has high levels of CBD or CBD, but it does not have THC, or it defines at less than 0.3% of THC. And this 0.3 is key, as you will see later on. So any CBD product from hemp that has 0.3 or higher, it is not legal. So anyway, so this is the difference between hemp and marijuana. This is the public opinion of the US in terms of legalizing marijuana. So as you can see, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, until the 2019 Pew Research Center survey, they uncovered that two-thirds of the population in the United States is in favor of legalizing marijuana. And as you can see, the younger generations are the ones that are more in favor of marijuana legalization. So this is basically the map of the legal states, programs of marijuana in different states. So there are basically 34 states that has some sort of medical legalization, and 11 states have actually passed legislation to approve recreational use of marijuana. 18 of them have only CBD, and 3 of them have nothing. Among them is South Dakota and this in the Midwest. So as you can imagine, this wave of legalization of marijuana in different states has increased the exposure of cannabis to the population. Or in other words, the population of the United States have more access to this drug, and therefore the use of marijuana, or the prevalence use of marijuana, has increased. As this paper shows, it was the prevalence of marijuana use was 4.1% between 2001 and 2002, but a decade later, it was 9.5%. And obviously, as well, the marijuana use disorder prevalence increased during the last years. So right now, nearly 3 out of 10 marijuana users refer to have marijuana use disorders. So we know that cannabis may have some potential uses, but the wave of legalization may actually bring these additional problems, as we can imagine. So this is the marijuana research front. As modern pharmacy, as modern medicine, what we are trying to do is to understand why marijuana has these potential effects and how these potential effects could be used for the clinic. So then, obviously, what we would like to do is to understand what are the constituents of the plant, and then pick 1 or 2 and try to see if these are the molecules that could be used or to provide some beneficial effects without the potential side effects. So the major components are THC and CBD, and in less amounts cannabinol, but also there are other about 100% of cannabinoids that are available in this plant. And when I say cannabinoids, these are constituents that are only present in cannabis but not other plants. And then there is other very interesting molecules that are called terpenes. So the terpenes are very volatile molecules. They are basically the molecules that provide the smell of the plant. And these terpenes are common with other plants as well. Like, for example, the citrus, lime, lemon, orange, that particular smell are based on, or terpene. Even pine, the pine leaves, when you peel an orange, for example, the whole room smells like orange. So it's due to the terpenes. And these terpenes are very different and are very abundant in marijuana. And therefore, it may or may not have some influence in the effects of the plant. But these are the major fronts. However, the 2 particular components that have been mostly studied is THC and CBD. So THC binds to cannabinoid receptor 1 and 2. So this is an agonist. The THC activates these receptors that are mostly CB1 is present in the brain, and therefore it produces these psychotropic effects that induces the high in recreational users. And it also is responsible of the potential analgesic effects of marijuana. So CBD is a very different molecule in terms of the pharmacology. Even though molecularly it's very similar to THC, pharmacologically is very different because it does not act as an agonist of CB1 or CB2. So it does not act through CB1 or CB2 receptor mostly. So it's very tricky because CBD in some occasions or under certain circumstances can modulate the activity of CB1 or CB2 receptors. So it could act as a modulator of the activity. So pharmacologically it's very different. So therefore, the pharmacodynamic or the effects that CBD will produce are very different than THC. So mistakenly, people think or refer to CBD as a non-psychotropic molecule, which is not true because CBD does have psychotropic effects. It does not produce intoxicating effects. It does not produce the high of THC, but it does produce sedative effects. And in fact, it produces very severe seizures because it's used for epilepsy. So it does have psychotropic effects, actually very potent psychotropic effects, but are different to the THC. So these are the two potential molecules, the molecules that has potential clinical use. It has been described potential effects such as analgesic, anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidants, antiemetic, anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, anticonvulsants, cytotoxic effects for some cancer cell lines, but not cancer itself, not tumors, but cell lines. So it may have some effects based on their pharmacology, which is very different. However, according to the DEA, it is an illegal Schedule 1 drug with basically no accepted medical use, which is obviously ridiculous because, as we know, THC and CBD does not meet these criteria for a Schedule 1. Like potential of abuse, yes, it does have potential of abuse, particularly THC. CBD doesn't. There is no medical use. We know that there is medical use. And lack of safety to be prescribed by doctors. So this is also very questionable. So anyway, so we have in this dichotomy of the problems that the DEA sees with this drug, and then the potential benefit that some patients have found, particularly chronic pain patients that have found with THC. And these patients, remember, they don't have any other option. The other pharmaceuticals that we have to treat pain, they're ineffective or they are very, they're not that safe. They produce side effects. So these patients had to use a different resort, in this case, sometimes cannabis, and they refer that they may receive some relief. So based on this, because the federal government has taken this substance as illegal, states have taken this space and they have legalized marijuana in order to breach this gap for patients. So NIH sometimes described that cannabis, in fact, has pain, spasticity, nausea, appetite, and ocular indications. However, these statements were removed later on because I guess that it would be a little embarrassing to having two federal agencies saying opposite things. So anyways, the cannabinoid receptors are located all over the brain, in all the areas of the brain except in the areas in which respiration is controlled. That's why an overdose of cannabis will not produce the cessation of breathing and is considered a little bit safer in that regard. However, it does have a huge presence in the brainstem and in spinal cord where pain relief is controlled. But it also has a presence in the amygdala in which anxiety and emotions and fear are processed. And this means that if we have THC, it will act on the amygdala and it will enhance anxiety. Remember that one of the psychotropic effects of cannabis is paranoia and anxiety, right? So, and that makes sense because we have CB1 and CB2, well, mostly CB1 receptors in the amygdala. But remember, CBD does not act in these receptors, so therefore it does not produce these effects or does not act in these areas of the brain. So let's start with the first objective. So what do we know about the utility of cannabis products for pain and anxiety? All right, so this is the report that it was released in 2015 by the National Academy of Sciences. This is the most comprehensive review of the effects of cannabis and cannabinoids. And this is perhaps one of the very few studies in which these people separate the effects of cannabis as the plant and cannabinoids as the extracts of the plant. So remember that cannabis have certain levels of THC, certain levels of CBD, terpenes, and other 100 cannabinoids. However, the extracts are only THC or only CBD or THC and CBD plus some terpenes, but it's very different than the whole plant. So most of the reviews that you could see in the literature, they mix both things. They mix the effects of CBD and THC alone with the plant, and then you have very negative reviews. But when you separate both, then you can have some very interesting results. So these guys concluded that there is conclusive or substantial evidence that cannabis, the plant, is effective to treat chronic pain in some patients and at a certain level. So it is not like it would treat all patients, all sorts of chronic pain, and it would just basically blunt pain. No, it's a probably 30% reduction of pain in approximately 30 to 35% of patients with neuropathic chronic pain. But that's the plant, and mostly inhaled. That means smoked or vaporized. So there are some evidence for oral cannabinoids. This is THC mostly, as antiemetic for chemotherapy. And also, oral cannabinoids seems to be effective for the spasticity in multiple sclerosis. And this is mostly reported by patients. That means that if a patient takes an oral cannabinoid for spasticity and the doctor evaluates, the doctor doesn't see any improvement. However, the patient says, yes, I'm feeling better. And the doctor doesn't see this. So it is for patient-reported spasticity in multiple sclerosis. And lately, the report doesn't describe the effects of CBD on these seizure syndromes, because these papers in the New England Journal of Medicine came a couple of years later. So CBD, not THC. This is the extract of the plant. So CBD, pure CBD, is effective to treat untreatable syndromes of epilepsy, like the Lennox-Gastaut and the Dravet syndrome. So these are two different syndromes that attacks mostly young individuals that have multiple seizures per day, and none of the drugs that are currently available as anticonvulsants work at all. So this is very significant, because this is the first drug from cannabis that has been legalized to treat specifically these syndromes. So CBD has been legalized to treat these untreatable syndromes, but it's CBD, not THC. So that's why when it says, oh, I use cannabis to treat the seizures of my kids, that is very ambiguous, because remember, cannabis could be hemp or could be or marijuana, could be with THC. And THC does not seem to play a role in these effects of CBD. So there is moderate evidence for sleep problems in patients with obstructive sleep apnea, with fibromyalgia and chronic pain and multiple sclerosis. And this is for oral cannabinoids. This is important because patients with chronic pain, particularly, they cannot sleep well. So it is good to know that it is also effective not only to reduce pain, but improve sleep problems. All right, so as I say, the FDA approved CBD, which is derived by cannabis. However, so CBD is legal by FDA if doesn't have THC and at the 0.1% level. So that means that the CBD from hemp that is legal, which is 0.3% THC, it is not an Schedule 5. It remains a Schedule 1 because it has more than 0.1% THC. So yeah, so it's very tricky. But anyway, so how much marijuana do we need? Remember, marijuana, THC, to treat pain, because the objective is to talk about pain and anxiety. So all this literature, and this is a review that we did with my group in my lab, about what is the concentration of marijuana or THC that you need to treat pain. All the studies that are randomized and controlled studies describe that marijuana is analgesic in neuropathic chronic pain when it's used with less than 10% THC. This is very important because 10% THC is highly intoxicating. So both low levels and medium levels THC, even 1.2% and 3.5% of vaporized THC is sufficient to reduce neuropathic pain. So this is important to remember. And it's important because remember that pharmacologically, we always try to give the lowest effective dose in order to prevent side effects. So that's what we like to focus on pain. So all the studies show that you don't need more than 10% to treat pain. Even more than 10% may, in some occasions, worsen the pain. So we don't need to go above 10%. So there is limited evidence, the report says, limited. That means a very weak evidence in improving symptoms of Tourette syndrome. Tourette syndrome produces also tics in individuals and also deficits in attention, and also anxiety. But it's very weak evidence for that. And also weak evidence in improving anxiety symptoms as assessed by public speaking test in individuals with social anxiety disorders. This is for cannabidiol, for CBD. So CBD is being marketed to reduce anxiety, but it's very limited evidence for this. And then also very limited evidence to improve symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So, but we know that that there are some potential for these conditions. So it just needs to be more studies about it. But that is the evidence. So how much CBD do we need for the potential anti-anxiety level? So it seems that it can reduce the effects of social anxiety disorder using between 300 to 600 milligrams of CBD, and this is given orally. And this is the equivalent of 8 to 12% CBD in herbal products. That is a lot. That is really high concentrations of CBD. And the literature shows that there are basically 9 randomized clinical studies, and 1 with low risk of bias, 4 with high risk of bias, and 4 with uncertain risk of bias. So we basically have just 1 study that we can literally trust. But in these 9 studies, they tried 300, 600, 900 milligrams of CBD, which are very high doses, which are the doses that more or less produces the anti-epileptic effects. So these are high doses. In some studies, they show reduction of anxiety. In others, they show no effect with some doses, effects with lower doses. In some others, there are negative effects of anxiety. In others, it does reduces anxiety, but also produces sedation. We know that CBD produces sedation. So maybe the reduction of anxiety is just because patients are a little sedated. And there are no effects in other studies, no effects in other studies as well. So as you can see, the literature shows very limited evidence that it could be effective that CBD could be effective for anxiety. So the conclusion for this first objective is, so there is conclusive evidence that herbal cannabis inhaled is effective for some patients with neuropathic chronic pain, but in low concentrations of THC. So lower than 10% for sure. And there is limited evidence that CBD could reduce anxiety in some cases, but it requires high doses of oral CBD. So the next objective is, what can we learn from states that have increased access about how to use these products clinically? All right, so first we know already how much THC and how much CBD it is needed for potential anxiety and for potential analgesic effects. So what type of products do we talk here? What are we talking about? What do we have access to in order to determine if these products that are available for patients could be useful or not, for what we know? All right, so this is the illicit drugs that have been confiscated by the law enforcement, by DEA, and they measure the THC levels. In the y-axis is THC levels, and this is time in years. So in the 90s, the THC levels of cannabis, illicit cannabis, was about 4 to 5%. And this has been increasing and increasing year after year. And nowadays, in 2017, there is an average of 16% THC. That's really high. So what does this mean? This means that with these levels of THC, with 4 to 5%, the risk of side effects is very low. It's just exactly as you actually, when you take ibuprofen. If you take 400 milligrams of ibuprofen, which is over the counter, you'll be much safer than if you take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, that you require a prescription for that, by the way. So what happens with these high concentrations? We don't know. We really don't know. We will know in a couple of years, maybe, or in 10 years, when people that is using this drug have been using it for a chronic period of time, for a long period of time. But we know that pharmacologically, the higher the dose, the less safe, and the more likelihood to develop side effects. So this is what happens in the illicit market. So this is what people have access where the states don't, in states in which we don't have legal programs of marijuana. However, they have found that the cannabis could be as high as 37% THC, hashish could be 66%, and hash oil could be 81%. So are these concentrations, are these products suitable for medical purposes? Not really. So medical and recreational cannabis are very different, or should be different at least, based on what the science is telling us. So that's what the thought that I want to implant you in order to follow what we're going to take you. So this is a quick search in marijuana.com. Look, these guys were awesome. They just basically registered marijuana.com. That's fantastic. I admire their productivity. But when you type marijuana.com, you will see something like this. So these are products. AK-47 is the name of the drug. What a beautiful name. But look, 36% of THC, 36%. If you are a naive cannabis person, if you have never tried cannabis, and you smoke a little bit of 5 or 10%, you will get very intoxicated. So imagine 36%. So AK-47, it's called that way for a reason. I just wonder what is going to happen when they bring the AK-48. Obviously, I don't use guns, so I don't know what that is. But anyways, if you see the other one, Super Sour Diesel, what a name, 22% THC. And these other guys, 22%, 23%. So these concentrations seems to be now dominating the market, okay? So this is what is offered online, and this is what patients will actually see, right? If a patient has chronic pain and wants to try marijuana and go online, this is what they will see. And you're getting more or less where I'm going, right? Remember that pain is the major reason for medical marijuana use. Up to 80% of people that are using marijuana for medical purposes use it, or they say that it's for chronic pain, following by other conditions that produces pain. So this is a paper that mapped the legal marijuana programs, different states, and they found all these conditions for which marijuana could be treated apparently. So hepatitis C, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, Alzheimer's, anorexia, etc. So a lot of things that obviously we don't have any evidence for, right? However, there is no available data on THC content. So what is the concentration of the products that are offered in legal programs? Remember, this is pharmacology. We need to know how much we need to give to patients, and the scientific evidence is there. So we know how much they need to treat their condition. So we need to know what is the concentration of THC and CBD of the products that are available in these legal programs. But there is no data for that. So we investigated this. We just published a paper on this. And we base our assumption in this other paper that we published, in which, based on the literature, we know that more or less 5% THC is the concentration that we actually should use for patients with chronic pain, if they want to try that. No more than 10%. 10%, you are getting into the risky area to develop serious acute side effects and very serious potential long-term effects. Remember, these are chronic pain patients. They will use this, if it is effective for their pain, they will use it regularly for a long period of time. So you don't want to give them a high concentration a product, because they will use it for a long time. So there are some patients that are already tolerant, that are regular users, so they may need some 10% or so, but not naive patients. So we would like to investigate what is the concentration of this and see if the products that are available in medical programs and in recreational programs are suitable for medical purposes in terms of pain treatment. So this is the map. So we evaluated the THC and CBD concentration in all these Northeast states, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states, and we also compared this in 4 states in the West. So these are large and small states. So what we found was in the medical programs, the concentration of THC is in average 20%. And in the recreational realm, it's significantly higher, but it was about 20% as well. 20%. And there are products that are 40, 50, 60, 70% THC. The CBD is very low though. It's, even though we have some high products here, we have less than 2% CBD. So we have products basically in all the United States that are really potent in terms of THC and very low concentrations of CBD. If we just segregate this data by the different states, we have that Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Mexico, Colorado, Washington, and California, they all have similar high levels. About 20% is the average. The gray states are recreational marijuana programs. And these guys, the black ones, are only medical. So medical or recreational, they do have the same very strong, very potent products. And all these programs have very low CBD concentration products. So when we segregated by 3 different categories, 5%, which is suitable for medical purposes, between 5 to 10, also could be used for some patients, 10 to 15, not really. More than 15, for sure not. What is the distribution or the prevalence of these products in these states? We observe that the green is more than 15%. 70, 71, 80, 85, 90%, 83% of products are higher than 15%. So the vast majority of products that patients are finding in legal medical programs are extremely potent, are really, really potent. They don't need that, but that is what they will mostly find. And that is worrisome. So we compare then Colorado and Washington because these guys have recreational and medical programs in the same state. And the reason that we pick these two is because in Colorado, you do have medical and recreational in the same building. And in Washington, you have medical and recreational, but in different buildings. So we wanted to see if there is any difference, but basically there is no difference. So the THC is about 20% in all these programs, medical or recreational in any state. And the CBD was really low as well, less than 2% in all programs. And again, the prevalence of the really high potency THC is about 90% in all these programs. So, we have a limitation here because we did not study CBD concentration in products designed to be given orally or in edibles, and it needs to be done. But this is something that is in progress. But basically, that's what we found. We didn't do the CBD concentration in edibles, but there are studies in which they have actually gathered the CBD products that are given orally nationwide, and they get some studies and they get some products, they measure the CBD levels, and what they have found is very surprising and worrisome. 43% of the products were under label. That means that they say that it has less than what it actually has. So the product has much more than what they say that it has. 27% or 26% were over label. So that means that it has very low concentrations to what it says. And only 31% was accurately labeled. So the concentration of unlabeled cannabinoids was generally low. And then the more worrisome is that THC was detected up to 6.4 milligrams, which is very high, in 18 out of 84 samples tested. So if we extrapolate this into the products that we have in North Carolina, we should be really worried, because literally what this study is telling us is that all these products that are out there, we don't know exactly what they have. And what is worse, they may have THC. So if you're gonna give CBD to kids, you may be giving them THC. And that is worrisome because you know that THC may have neurotoxic effects, especially in young populations. So the conclusion for this objective is that it seems that legal programs offer mostly products that are very potent, that will not be suitable for pain management, and will increase the risk of acute intoxication and potentially long-term problems of abuse. Herbal products have mostly low CBD concentrations that may not be effective for anxiety, and most of them contain THC, which could produce anxiety and intoxicating effects. And then available oral CBD products have unknown or low concentrations that may not be effective or could have THC, which could produce intoxicating effects. So the third objective was, how does that need to be adopted in states with limited access or access only to illicit recreational cannabis? So what do we know? Based on this data that I showed you, is that recreational and medicinal programs should be distinct and better regulated. So the current legal programs are regulated in a similar way that allows the availability of really, really high potency products that it has no place in the medicinal realm. So there is no place for highly potent products in the medicinal realm. And perhaps this needs to be somehow regulated as well in the recreational program. The states with no legal cannabis programs have the opportunity to create a model for policies that provide safer options to patients and recreational users. So North Carolina is one of these states. So we have the opportunity to create a model that could be mimicked, and it could be actually use this potential product that it could help a lot of patients, but if it is used properly, and if we can create policies that actually are really well regulated to provide safer options to our patients. And the last objective, CBD products are available in North Carolina and other states in this region. So what do we know about their effectiveness? How can those products be used clinically? Based to what we have seen in my presentation, we know very little about the quality and accuracy of CBD concentration in these products. Therefore, its clinical use is not recommended. It's literally not recommended because we don't know. Could you imagine if a patient comes to you and asks you, doctor, can I take this pill? What is it? Well, apparently it is ibuprofen. Are you sure that it's ibuprofen? Yeah, they told me that it is. What will you tell them? Of course not, right? So basically the CBD products that are available in North Carolina are something like that. We really don't know what they are. So most of these products are available as supplements, and they are not clinically grade. They are not pharmaceuticals. So therefore, they may be ineffective or they may be unsafe, because if they are not clinically grade, they may have other things there that could be toxic, and also could be ineffective because as a supplement, you really need low concentrations. And as you saw, you need really high concentrations to treat epilepsy and potentially anxiety. And again, those concentrations are not safe. It produces sedation. It also produces hepatotoxicity, so the liver toxicity in some occasions. So it is not completely safe. So FDA has issued over 50 warning letters to CBD manufacturers and retailers for false claims. So the only clinical evidence, remember, the only clinical evidence for CBD is untreatable epileptic syndromes. And there is weak evidence for anxiety, for nothing else. We don't have any evidence that CBD can reduce pain. We don't. We really don't have. I wish, and CBD is so prevalent and so common right now that if it has an effect, we will know it by now. It seems that it doesn't have an effect as of now. It requires to be better studied though. The doses needed for epileptic syndromes and anxiety are really high. So the available products may not have these concentrations and they could be ineffective because remember, they are supplements. And even though you obtain a really high concentration CBD, it is dangerous because it may cause liver toxicity. It is not as safe as people believe it is. It is sedative as well, so it has some psychotropic effects. Even though it doesn't have abuse potential, or it has a very reduced abuse potential, the toxicities are serious, and we should think about that. So this is what I have. This is acknowledgements. This is the paper that we just published with these very talented students, Katie Cash, Katie Cunane, and Jean Fan. These are students of pharmacy, and Katie is a senior undergrad student that is in my lab. So they are all authors of this paper. So this is what I have. Thank you so much. These are other resources that you can find from my lab. And I don't know how much time I did. 37 minutes. Sorry, I was a little.
We're a little over, but by popular demand, we kept you up there. We'll still have everybody out of here by 5 o'clock.
Awesome. Great. So I apologize that
Thank you so much. That was really something.